I'm Peter McMillan, founder and CEO of Meisterline, the world's leading provider of professional expertise metrics. This case study will show you how measuring the expertise of lawyers across multiple firms using Coogee ratings provides invaluable comparative pricing data for both law firms and clients. We have other videos that describe in detail how we go about measuring lawyers' expertise and much more. You can find them listed in the video description below, and you can subscribe to this channel to be notified when we release more. In this case study, we'll be comparing two hypothetical law firms, both of which are based in London. While these firms don't represent any particular organisations, they're not atypical of many law firms across many jurisdictions around the world today. The first firm in this case study is Aiken, Poll & Chan, with 180 lawyers in their London office. The second is Gannett Reeves, with 142 lawyers. We've assessed the lawyers in both firms across 8 practice areas, namely banking and finance, competition, corporate commercial, employment, intellectual property, telecommunications, media and technology, or TMT, real estate and tax. All the data I'll be analysing here are included in the spreadsheet linked in the description below. Feel free to download these data into Excel or Google Sheets to discover for yourself the kinds of game-changing insights you'll get when you know precisely how expert your lawyers are. Now to our comparative analysis, which focuses on the price as measured by the hourly fees of lawyers in both firms. We could compare other variables as well, such as how gender or ethnicities are treated differently in each firm with reference to lawyers' expertise, but price is the one we'll look at here. This chart measures lawyers' expertise along the horizontal axis, with the units being the 99-point Coogee rating scale, which runs from 0.1 to 9.9. The vertical axis is the hourly fee for each lawyer in British pounds. We'll start with Gannett Reeves as our first law firm and plot the maximum hourly fees for their lawyers according to their levels of expertise. If we therefore take a Coogee rating of say 4.5, that gives us an hourly fee of £585, and that's the maximum amount a client would pay for a Gannett lawyer with this level of expertise. Now we can add in the data for our second law firm, Aiken, Poll & Chan. Immediately, we can see some differences between these firms in how they price their experts in terms of the maximum fees they charge for their lawyers. But for our purposes, I want to look instead at the minimum hourly fees these firms charge for their lawyers with reference to their expertise. These are, in effect, the most competitive offerings from both firms. And I want to go one step further because a lawyer might be great value for money on an expertise to hourly fee basis, but if they are specialists in an area of law a client doesn't need advice in, then they're not really an option. Which is why we'll now drill down into the corporate commercial practice of Gannett and Aiken, where we can imagine putting together a team of lawyers with varying degrees of expertise, perhaps to complete a large M&A transaction. Now imagine we're a client and we're looking for the best value for money team for this work. Which firm offers us the most compelling value proposition? Actually, it's not as straightforward an exercise as it might seem because we're looking at two firms with different pricing models. Let me explain by introducing this red dotted line. That's my attempt to divide this chart into two parts. In the first part, up to the dotted red line, we have Gannett Reeves, and in the second part, we have Aiken, Poll & Chan. The significance of this division lies in the way the data favour Gannett Reeves up to the dotted line, and then Aiken becomes more attractive. On Gannett's side of the line, its lawyers, shown by the yellow columns, are on the whole less expensive than Aiken's lawyers. There are some minor exceptions, but overall, Gannett is valuing these lawyers more economically than Aiken is. If we therefore only need corporate and commercial lawyers with expertise ratings less than the point at which the red dotted line appears, it would seem obvious to choose Gannett Reeves, all other things being equal, of course. Remember, we are comparing apples with apples here, which is truly groundbreaking. All these lawyers have had their specialist expertise objectively and independently assessed, with their Coogee ratings providing a reliable quantitative measure that is both meaningful in a cognitive development sense and also for enabling spreadsheet comparisons like this one. So we know that if we need a lawyer with a Coogee rating of 3.2, the least expensive Aiken specialist we could hire would cost us £525 an hour, but the least expensive Gannett lawyer would be 16% cheaper at £438 an hour. Obviously, this involves some cherry picking. If we simply move down to a Coogee rating of 3.1, we can find an Aiken lawyer with an hourly fee of £410, and even further down the expertise scale, we see more Aiken lawyers who would be less expensive than their Gannett counterparts. And at the 5.5 rating level, there is a much more expert Aiken corporate commercial lawyer who is also only £410 compared to a less expert Gannett lawyer being charged out at £630 per hour. That's more than a 50% price increase. But standing back, generally on this left side of the red dotted line, Gannett's corporate commercial lawyers offer better value for money than Aiken's lawyers at these levels of expertise, which is potentially very significant given in large M&A transactions, lawyers at this level could be accumulating hundreds if not thousands of billable hours. But to the right side of the dotted line, the value equation flips convincingly in Aiken's favour. Apart from these more competitively priced Gannett lawyers with ratings of 6.3 and 6.8, no Aiken lawyer is more expensive than their comparable counterparts at Gannett. This is where the weighting of expertise within the teams proposed by these firms would now come into play. Assuming these minimum prices represent the prices these firms would charge for their lawyers, a question would be whether the client needs a top-heavy team with more rather than fewer high expertise specialists, or a bottom-heavy one with more low expertise specialists. If this M&A transaction is likely to be particularly complex and a high-stakes acquisition, then Aiken, with its less expensive but equally expert high-level lawyers, would seem to be the better choice. But for a more routine transaction that might, for instance, be run by a client's own in-house team and require mostly low-level outside experts, Gannett could be the better option, which is where the client's level of sophistication and knowledge of what they need become key ingredients in determining the right mix of lawyers and how cost-effectively they can be hired. Now let's do the same exercise for these two firms' tax law practices. These are smaller practice groups at both firms, but it's still possible to insert a red dotted line and position our two firms on either side of it to highlight differences in how they price their expertise as we move along the Coogee rating scale. We have fewer data points, so it's a bit less clear where the line should go, or even if there should be a line at all. But I think we can get a sense for which firm fits better on which side of this line. The one observation I'd make here is how inexpensive this master-level tax lawyer at Aiken is, even compared with their less expert colleagues. In this quick assessment, they seem to represent outstanding value. It would be good to know more about them and find out why they're so reasonably priced. Finally, we'll look at the banking and finance teams at both firms. While we could find a place for our dotted red line here, I'm not sure it's as straightforward as it was for the corporate commercial lawyers. Nevertheless, I'll tentatively position our firms as usual, but in a more general way. What I do want to highlight, and which is very obvious in this chart, is that if a client needs banking and finance specialists with the highest levels of expertise, then they really only have one choice. Only Aiken has lawyers in this area above the 8.3 Coogee rating level. And interestingly, none of these lawyers is more expensive than the most economically priced Gannett lawyer adjacent to, but less expert than, these Aiken lawyers. Having looked at these individual practice areas, let's broaden our analysis again and see what further insights we can get on a firm-wide basis when comparing the pricing functions of these two firms. We'll start with the minimum hourly fees for both Gannett and Aiken. What I want to do is approximate the slope of the pricing functions used by these firms. I'll keep it simple just to illustrate the concept, so no curves, just a linear representation. For Gannett, we've seen how their less expert lawyers are priced more cost effectively than Aiken's equivalent level lawyers. But Gannett's more expert lawyers are materially more expensive to hire than Aiken's. When we plot an approximation of its linear pricing function, it looks something like this. For Aiken, we have a different expertise to price profile, one that is less sloped or flatter in comparison to Gannett's line. Let's see if we might be able to reintroduce our red dotted line, indicating the crossover point where the price advantage swaps from Gannett to Aiken, which seems to happen around a Coogee rating of 3.3. I'm not sure it adds much, but it might suggest something of an inflection point around these levels of expertise. Now, this is a comparison of minimum hourly fees. What happens when we switch to maximum hourly fees for each level of expertise across both firms? It looks like there's an increased separation at the higher end of the expertise scale. This is because the increases in price of Gannett's lawyers at the expert and master levels are greater than the increases for Aiken's equivalent experts. Again, we haven't split these data by practice areas, so we don't know which areas or which lawyers are involved here. That would be a very useful analysis to do, but not one we have time to complete in this video, though you can do it yourself if you download the spreadsheet below. So what has this case study shown us? First, we've seen how we can now compare apples with apples, by which I mean lawyers with equivalent levels of expertise. Second, we can quantify differences between law firms, practice areas, and individual attorneys, not just in dollar or pound terms, but also in terms of their objectively and independently assessed specialist capabilities. That's the innovation that enables us to undertake the kinds of analyses that we've just undertaken in this video. By comparing and benchmarking lawyers from different firms in this way, we can ask questions that have never been asked before, such as, why is one firm charging up to 20% higher fees or more for the same levels of legal expertise compared to another firm? This shifts the onus back onto the firm's management teams, who will need to be able to justify or at least explain their pricing decisions and how they go about valuing their legal experts. Once law firms begin to see the competitive landscape in this new way, they'll have the opportunity to respond with more efficient pricing models. We also saw that within firms there can be a surprising lack of internal consistency with their pricing models, particularly when more expert lawyers can be charged out at significantly lower hourly fees than lawyers who are less expert, which leads to further questions about whether the former's fees should be increased or the latter's decreased, or both. I haven't gone into the intra-firm pricing dynamics in this case study, as I've covered them in some detail in our other case study on lawyer pricing, which is linked below. But perhaps the biggest impact will be on the client side. General counsel, legal procurement professionals, and CFOs will be much better placed to question their law firm's fees. With quantifiable expertise and pricing metrics in their spreadsheets, they'll be able to choose lawyers from firms that they might otherwise have never considered. Armed with the Coogee ratings and the price schedules of a diverse group of legal service providers, not only will clients be able to make better informed decisions about which firms can offer the best value for money expertise for their legal projects, even within law firms, clients will have the ability to cross-compare and cherry-pick the legal specialists for their outside legal teams. If you'd like to learn more about the Coogee rating scale and what we do at Meisterline, we've created a series of videos covering the origins, mechanics, and applications of Coogee ratings and our other professional expertise metrics. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to like and subscribe, and connect with us on LinkedIn and on our website at meisterline.com. Thanks for watching.